Thanks very much, Derek, and hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about a project that I've spent the last 3 years helping to develop. Knowledge Unlatched is a globally coordinated initiative that's helping libraries from around the world to make scholarly books open access. I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about the initiative's context before taking you through the 2014 global pilot of the model and talking about the results of that. So I'm a little bit embarrassed about this slide because I'm in danger of telling librarians what a monograph is, but I usually begin presentations by talking about monographs because our model is dealing with a really specific area of publishing. We're not dealing with all books, we're not dealing with all academic content, we're only dealing with scholarly monographs. Monographs are generally a sole-authored book on a single subject written by research academics for research audiences. They're a key requirement for tenure and promotion in the humanities in particular, and that means that they serve a professional certification role for academics who want to make their career in the humanities. But they're generally not read widely beyond universities. So this is a research monograph by me, and it's a reasonably typical example of what I'm talking about. I was funded by the Australian taxpayer, one way or another, to spend several years doing my PhD, and then I was fortunate to have a postdoc, which allowed me to produce a monograph. So that's quite a reasonable significance by Australian taxpayers in the production of what turned out to be a book. And my university were really delighted to see that it was published by a well-recognised law and economics publisher. So that fulfilled my professional certification role, and I got to tick a box, and I had a metric which made it much easier for me to then secure a job and get promoted. However, it was published, like most monographs, in a closed format, and it sells at a price that's too high for most individual readers. So for anyone who's ever bought a law-related monograph, you'll know that this is actually quite a reasonable price for a monograph. It's for sale at £65 on the publisher website or $110 on Amazon. And some monographs will cost as much as $250 just for one book. As a result, most of these books will typically sell around, does anyone want to guess? 200 copies, that's right. So 200 copies, lots not, and most of those copies are bought by well-funded university libraries, typically in the UK and Western Europe. They're the UK and the United States are the two biggest global markets for scholarly monographs. And the chances that most authors are going to receive a royalty payment from writing this kind of book are pretty slim. So as an example, my contract states that I'll get a royalty payment when the book sells more than 500 copies. And I'm doing pretty well. I've sold 350, but luckily for me, I've got a job at a university and I'm not relying on royalty payments to feed my children, because if I were, like most research academics, I would probably be fairly hungry. So a rational person sitting down and designing a knowledge dissemination model for the 21st century might not see the traditional monograph as an ideal solution, particularly given the opportunities of digital technology and the internet. The arguments for change in this area of publishing are even stronger if you take a look at what's been happening to monograph sales over the last few decades. Some estimates are suggesting that monograph sales have declined globally by as much as 90% over 20 years. Publishers and authors all over the world are feeling the effects of what's essentially a global collapse in the monograph market. Monograph publishers in every market have found themselves caught in a negative cycle. Declining sales have resulted in higher prices, as the costs of publishing each monograph have to be spread across a smaller number of unit sales. And it really is a crisis for people who rely on these kinds of books for their discipline area and for career purposes. It's a market where no one's winning at the moment. Monograph publishing is marginally profitable at best, and in most cases it has to be subsidised. So Melbourne University Press, I believe, was receiving $1 million in taxpayer or in Melbourne University support in order to allow the press to continue, and there's quite a widespread argument that increasing subsidies to university presses is something that should be considered. At the same time, libraries are struggling to afford these kinds of books. Authors are finding it harder to get published because it's hard to convince, particularly if you're a first-time author, a publisher to take on a book which will potentially be a loss-making book for the publisher. Even not-for-profit publishers can't afford to take on loss-making books. And readers are struggling to access the knowledge and ideas that specialist scholarly books contain. A key factor in all of this is the role of libraries as the biggest market for monographs. The role that libraries play as the main purchasers of scholarly books has left monographs vulnerable to contractions in library budgets. Increases in the costs of maintaining journal subscriptions have left little money to support book-length publications, and library book budgets haven't kept pace with the global expansion of academic communities and the growth in the number of authors that therefore have to get a book published so that they can go on to have a career. And all of that means that the shift to open access has arrived at a moment when the systems that support specialist scholarly books are already under pressure. Digital technologies are presenting scholarly communities with opportunities to widen access to content and to increase the impact and reach of their work. Research funders are increasingly requiring open access, including in Australia, where the Australian Research Council has mandated open access to all publicly funded or all ARC-funded research outputs, including scholarly books. And there's a growing number of authors that need citations in order to have an interesting career. So there are lots and lots of authors who have cottoned on to the fact that if your book's published in open access, then your reach, your impact, your audience, and hopefully your citation rate may increase. So there's a growing number of authors that are approaching their publishers and asking whether or not their books can be made available in open access. So there are heaps of great reasons for books to become open access, and I'm sure that everyone here is more than familiar with the arguments for open access, particularly in relation to publicly funded research outputs, so I'm not going to go over that too much now. However, when we get to books, we've got a problem because the costs of publishing a 70 to 100,000 word book are a lot higher than they are for publishing a 5 to 10,000 word journal article. Publishers are beginning to experiment with open access options for books, largely driven by author demand, as well as the mandates which are being implemented around open access. But you can see here these figures, £11,000 or $17,500, are an author-side payment which is required by Palgrave Open in order to make a book available immediately upon publication in open access. And for most humanities authors, it's really impractical to be able to absorb that cost themselves, or to try and find a research budget which can suck that cost up. All of that means that monographs really do have a problem, and we need to have a look at some different models for supporting open access for this genre of publication. Which brings me very nicely to Knowledge Unlatched. Knowledge Unlatched is a not-for-profit initiative that's helping libraries from around the world to simply share that book processing charge, and by doing that, to make books available in open access rather than purchasing 200 individual copies of a closed title. We're focused, unlike some other projects, on frontlist titles, so that means that we're looking at new or forthcoming books, not at backlists. And by open access, we mean available to anyone in the world to read or download for free on a Creative Commons licence. So, here we go. So Knowledge Unlatched is based in London, and you can see that we had really broad international support for the pilot of the model. However, as the Australian on the project, I was really proud to see that we had 3 founding Australian libraries who, the University of Western Australia, the University of Melbourne, and Queensland University of Technology. And those libraries got behind the Knowledge Unlatched pilot very early on and made a global scale pilot possible. So I really think we should be, pretty proud of Australia's effort in resolving what's essentially a global crisis in scholarly communication. But we also had support from UK national funding councils, and that was really helpful in adding credibility to the project and also in helping us to engage with UK libraries and to get them involved in what we hope is going to be a sustainable solution to the open access challenge for monographs going forward. Okay, so can you play in a moment the video, Adam? So I'm now going to, I know we're in a post-lunch session and everyone's looking a bit tired. I'm going to play a really short video, which is a 60 seconds, Knowledge Unlatched in 60 seconds, and hopefully you're going to get an idea of what we were doing and what we were trying to achieve with the pilot.
Librarians from all over the world are sharing the costs of making scholarly books open access. Through Knowledge Unlatched, we're helping librarians join together to offer publishers a title fee. In return for the title fee, which is a fixed amount, publishers make scholarly books available to anyone, anywhere in the world, to read or download for free on a Creative Commons license. As more libraries join Knowledge Unlatched, and because the title fee is a fixed amount, the cost of making each book open access becomes less for each library. The world needs librarians like you to ensure that good books are available for everyone to read. Be the change. Help secure an open future for books by joining Knowledge Unlatched.
So that was the short video that we used when we were promoting the pilot, and it was very kindly made for us by the founder's husband, who you can hear reading the voiceover. So the idea behind Knowledge Unlatched is actually a pretty simple one. Rather than 200 libraries separately purchasing 200 closed copies of a book, we've invited libraries around the world to join together to offer publishers a single fixed title fee in return for the book being made available in open access as soon as it's published. And arguably the key innovation in this model is the concept of a title fee, which is similar to an article processing charge for books, but it can be shared by many institutions. The title fee represents the basic cost of publishing a book, and it includes a margin for publisher overheads. Payment of the title fee is intended to allow the publisher to feel confident that they're not going to make a loss on a book if it's made available on an open access licence. And we found to our delight when we piloted this model, it was a real experiment. We didn't know whether or not it would work. But we were really delighted by the buy-in that we got from monograph publishers who are generally mission-based. They don't tend to go into monograph publishing because it's such a lucrative area of the publishing industry. And a lot of monograph publishers internationally really do want to be able to find better mechanisms for supporting the communication and dissemination of ideas. So we thought that this would be a very hard sell to publishers. And in fact, what we've found is that we've now got quite a long, I think we've had more than 30 publishers pre-sign for our next collection. So it's a model that's popular with publishers. And there are advantages for both sides in this approach to supporting open access monographs. So you can see here that the title fee on the left, which is shared by a community of libraries, decreases for each library as the number of libraries taking part in the initiative grows. Publishers like the model because it gives them a single lump sum payment, which they get very early in the book's life, so early in their sales cycle. And of course, the publishers are able to continue selling print copies of the monograph. We're not trying to prevent them from doing that. And for publishers, this is just a way to feel confident that this particular book isn't going to make a loss, and to get the money in the door earlier so that they don't have to wait perhaps 5 years to recoup the costs of publishing the monograph in little dribs and drabs. So it lowers transaction costs for publishers too. So in 2014, Knowledge Unlatched ran a major global pilot of its model. And we worked really hard in developing the model to test the market, to consult with libraries and with publishers, and to come up with a model that we thought would be reasonably robust and which had a good chance of succeeding. However, it was a genuine experiment. So when we launched it, we didn't know whether or not we would succeed. And if we did succeed, the pilot was intended to serve as proof of concept for the Knowledge Unlatched idea, and we hoped it might seed other projects like Knowledge Unlatched, which were taking a creative approach to finding win-win situations for publishers, libraries, and for authors operating in this space. So our pilot collection included 28 new books from 13 publishers. It covered the humanities, really. It was focused on literature, history, politics, and media and communication. So social sciences, depending on how you slice that up. And we needed at least 200 libraries from around the world to sign up so that the collection could become open access. So we made a decision very early on that if we didn't get 200 libraries internationally signing up, then we simply wouldn't go ahead with the deal. It was a bit like Groupon. So we invited pledges from libraries, but if we had secured less than 200 pledges, we wouldn't have required payment from the libraries, and the books would just have been published as usual by the publishers in a regular closed format. But if we did get 200 libraries willing to take part, then we could guarantee to the libraries that they would pay no more than $60 for each copy of the monographs in the collection. And if more libraries signed up, then the costs of unlatching the collection, of making the collection open access, would decrease proportionally depending on the number of libraries that signed up. So at this point, you have no idea how nervous we were when we launched the model. but it was a real live experiment. So these were the publishers that took part in the pilot. They were a mix of 13 established scholarly presses, and we managed to get a reasonable mix of for-profit publishers or commercial operations and not-for-profit university presses, as well as publishers who were located in Western Europe, the UK and the US. We didn't manage to get any Australian publishers signed up in time for the pilot collection, but we've had strong interest from Australian publishers subsequently, and we hope that we can include Australian publishers in the next rounds of the program. These were our books. We were quite proud of our books. We were actually offered by publishers. Some of the publishers just gave us their forthcoming catalogues and said, OK, choose the books that you would like from our catalogue. And other publishers worked with their authors and gave us a smaller range of titles. But we had hundreds and hundreds of books that were offered to us for inclusion in the pilot collection. And so we worked with collections librarians at the New York Public Library in order to curate a single collection that we hoped was going to have broad global appeal and which would sell strongly. So what happened? 297 libraries pledged, in spite of the fact that I was the rest of the world marketing. And we had a YouTube video, and it really was, it was a small operation. But we did have distribution in the United States with Lyrasis, which are quite a big supplier to major US markets. And we also had the support of Hefke. And we received really strong support from Australian libraries and Call. So, all of that was fantastic. And librarians really did themselves proud and surprised us. And because so many libraries took part, the cost for each library, for each book, dropped to around $43 a book. And when we closed pledging for that particular collection, we were continuing to receive really strong interest, and we've had more than 100 really credible sign-ups for our next collections, in spite of the fact that we haven't announced them yet. So libraries were interested, they were eager. Publishers were interested and really keen to be involved. So we've got more than 30 publishers, and we've sort of closed our wait list on publishers, and libraries are continuing to pre-register through our website for the next collection, which is, I think, really hopeful. And this is where we got our pledges from. So you can see that the pledging really more or less reflected established markets for this kind of book. The United States pledged or had the most libraries signing up, and that's consistent with US university libraries being the world's single largest market for this genre of book. The UK came in very strongly in part of the Funding Council support for libraries that wanted to get involved in the project. So Hefke matched funding for libraries that wanted to take part in the pilot, and that was incredibly helpful. Australia really, considering the size of our university sector, did very well, and we had at least one state library that signed up, which was great. And the rest is pretty self-explanatory. The types of institution that signed up, well, unsurprisingly, given that we focused our marketing efforts on university libraries and that university libraries are really the only purchasers of this kind of book at the moment, university libraries were our main subscribers. However, we did have support from state and national libraries internationally, and I think that that reflected general interest in a new approach to making books available and to supporting open access. So that was fantastic. And we also had some really interesting additional pledges, people who found their way to our website or institutions that came across the project by chance and which decided to sign up. And at one point we had an agricultural college library, with a very small library signing up for the collection. We had community colleges in the United States. We had a high school that was really interested in taking part. And we even had a publishing consultancy firm which actually signed up and paid up. So, you know, I think that hints at the broader potential appeal of models like this if they were taken up in other areas of publishing. All of the books are now available in open access, so if you'd like to read any of them, then just please go to our website and you can click through if you click Pilot Collection. And you can then choose whether or not you'd like to download the PDF from OAPEN or the Hattie Trust. So we're being hosted on multiple platforms, and these books are all open access. So Unglued's another project, and they took the liberty of, we were really pleased, I shouldn't say that as if it's a bad thing, they put our collection on their website and lodged the collection in the Internet Archive, which is exactly what we had hoped would happen with these books. So they're available through lots of different channels, but Hattie Trust and OAPEN are the platforms that we've been working most closely with to make their content available. And the books are available if you go to the Directory of Open Access Books, which is a fantastic service. You can just search the collection and see the whole collection. And I should add that one of the selling points of Knowledge Unlatched for libraries, I think, was that we worked very closely with OCLC and with others, including some volunteer university libraries, so librarians actually worked on our MARC records, helped us to upgrade our metadata, and helped to make sure that this collection was integrated into web-scale search and discovery tools. So the open access versions of these books should be appearing in library catalogues everywhere, I hope. And we've done everything that we can to make sure that they're preserved. I think we've got 3 preservation platforms, which are, so Clocks, Portico, and OAPEN is also a preservation platform. So they're digitally preserved, they'll be available in open access in perpetuity, and with any luck they should be pretty easy to discover. We chose not to prescribe, beyond saying that we wanted Creative Commons licences, we didn't prescribe the type of licence that authors and publishers should attach to the titles. So I think that was a strength in the pilot, because we were a little bit surprised by some of the choices that publishers, in conversation with their authors, made in relation to the type of licence which was being made available for an identical, well, a pretty similar title fee across the collection. So the most popular licence with publishers and authors was Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Non-Derivatives, but 3 of the publishers and their authors decided that they were happy without or with derivatives, so they haven't applied a non-derivatives clause to their licence. And we had one which didn't choose a non-commercial licence, which was interesting, given that we had really expected that most of the publishers and authors would be really anxious to hold on to the commercial distribution rights for these books. And we're also now doing a lot of work around understanding how the books are being used now that they've become open access. So one of the great things about upgrading the metadata and working with partner platforms has been that we're now able to gather really good usage data on what's happening to the open access versions of the books once they've gone out into the world. And of course it's not comprehensive because the books can be hosted anywhere and we can't gather usage data from every platform. But just on the OAPEN platform, we've had more than 23,000 downloads of the titles in the collection since they went up. So those were the figures as of December. And there's also a really interesting range in the number of times each title's being downloaded. Our most popular book has been downloaded 1,822 times, and our least popular title in the collection has just been downloaded 176 times. So obviously, even with open access, some genres or some subject areas and some titles are always going to be more popular than others, and we're able to see that coming back through our usage data. This is where our titles, well, we've actually been downloaded now from 152 countries that we've been able to identify, and this is just our top 20 countries by download. And the US and the UK, we weren't surprised by. Germany, okay, there are a lot of smart people in Germany who read. That's good. But we were a little bit more surprised to see China in there, because China wasn't able to participate in the first round of the pilot. And I wasn't entirely clear that readers in China would have ready access to the download or to the platforms that we've been working with. So that's also really interesting to see. And our next challenge, of course, is to scale the project and to make it sustainable. So the development of the model, the market research that was put in before the pilot, and the pilot itself were all funded by our 3 founding libraries, as well as philanthropic and foundation support. But what we really want to do next is to make sure that this model doesn't just stop functioning because its grants dry up. And that's also one of the elements of the model that we were really careful to design in from the beginning. We want a model that will be self-sustaining, which will lower the costs to library communities and scholarly communities around the world, but which doesn't run out of money as some projects do when we run out of grants. So our plan is to take a small cut of each title fee as the books go through the system, and to use that small cut to cover the costs of operating the consortium, which is a pretty standard approach, but we hope will mean that we have a bright future. So if anyone would like more information, you can read a full pilot report, which you can download. You can pick up a pilot summary report from the table outside, or you can just come and speak to me, and I'd be really happy to talk to you. Okay, thank you.